The floor is open for questions to any of our speakers or all of the speakers. And we are going to be using the mic to do the live streaming.
If I may briefly, during the coffee and cookie break, somebody commented on my rapid-fire delivery. Yes, it's a 30-minute presentation, 20 minutes. Since it is fortunately on YouTube, or going to be on YouTube, I would propose you view it there, shut down the sound, ignore what I'm saying, and move the picture slowly. So you can study each one of them. And if you can't get enough of that, and you have a Dropbox, or I send you a memory stick, you can overindulge again and again. In our office, since that long ago, 52, we write and speak usually quite slowly. We just don't do public events much. So I'm not good at this. My husband wasn't good at this. I mentioned this Navy thing, the braggadocio part of my talk. When I got to sit down with folks out of that universe over at the Naval War College, I asked one of the guys who wanted to talk with me about this once he saw the publication. I asked, how much time will we have? He said, all afternoon. Of course, I didn't believe that. He gave me 3 hours and 20 minutes. I ran that show at my pace, not with a nasty light, and it was productive. By the time we were done, that was spent. It was a good thing. So I'm not good at these things. I do apologize somewhat. Second cup of coffee I've had now.
I do want to defend those lights. They were being used to keep us on schedule, but I do want to give the mic to Professor Nixon.
Question for Bob, Newport Biodiesel. Bob, remain proud that you helped found this company because you took a solid waste problem and you turned it into a really great green solution. I've been burning your fuel, as you know, in my home furnace now for 3 years. And the only complaint my technician is that he has nothing to clean every year because your fuel is so clean it doesn't produce any soot. But I'm concerned about your ability to break into the marine market. Is there anything that we, from the general boating population of our island, could do to help create the demand so that at least one of the spots you could buy fuel in Newport would go to the expense of adding a pump for marine fuel?
I wish I knew the answer to that. I mean, one thing I would like to suggest is maybe working with organizations like Sailors for the Sea and try and get the whole concept going. This program we're starting with the Storm Trysail Club, where we're going to have a sustainability committee. If we can get that going and try and get it, but it still remains this chicken or the egg thing because people want to use it, but it's not there, and it does take some logistics to make it work. And you know, we need that commitment. And like I said, the state has said we're going to have B20 and all diesel by 2035. Well, that's going to be a real accomplishment if we can actually do that. You know, so I'm hoping for the future to keep going. We're working on it, I'll tell you.
Where do you send most of your product now, Bob?
Right now, most of our product goes to distributors that deliver heating oil or on-road fuel. We sell some of our product to the terminals that distribute the fuel to the oil heat dealers, but they don't. One thing that's important to know is you can put up to 5% biodiesel in diesel, and you don't have to even say anything about it. So that's what they do, is they try and get biodiesel at a good price and go up to 5%. So almost every diesel fuel that you get has some biodiesel in it. But we want to get beyond that 5% and go to the 20. That's where you really get the environmental benefits, you know. Wouldn't do that.
Can I just add that as soon as we have one of the engines that the warranty is a bit of a situation, but as soon as we can use it, we'll use it and help spread the word where we can. He's coming in for American Promise.
John's got it.
Doug Brusa, the Oregon State University Foundation. First, I want to thank you all for your really fine, thoughtful presentations this afternoon. And then a question for Travis. I'm sorry if you said this and I missed it. What was the cost to build the Spirit of the Sound?
You didn't miss it. I didn't say it. That's a little bit of a stinger. So the final cost was $2.7 million. All, like I said, was private donations and raised funds. But now that the technology's been entered in the first hull. They're building the second hull for CUNY right now, and those bugs should be worked out.
And what's the length of the vessel again?
The length of the vessel is 64 feet.
64.
Hi, I have a question for Mike on the energy audits. Can you go back and tell us what happens when you do an energy audit and then you go back years later? Are they following the program? Are they really saving money, or is this like at initial, everyone's happy about it and then it kind of wanes?
It depends. Mixed results. I went back one company and they said they had all these great savings, and I didn't believe it because they didn't really implement too much. They had less business, right? So it went a little less. But other places that I've gone, they have taken action and have seen the reduction. And I was talking about earlier a lot with the culture as well. You know, I've been doing this about 8 years now, specializing it. And I do see the shift starting to happen. I'm not always patient enough sometimes, but I can actually see the results where people are more conscientious about going to it. You know, if you're doing something quick for quick technology, it's easy to document and see it right away. But the culture changes are definitely slower. Like on that graph up there where you see the reduction, I haven't gone back there, but I'm sure it's no longer down at that level, right? Because people, they turn things on and don't turn it back off. But the crew on there was great. Chief engineer was fantastic, and I have no doubt that he certainly made some changes. They changed the program right then and there while I was there. So it depends, but I think overall it does help. Awareness. I think a lot of it is just awareness.
I have a quick follow-up. What would be the cost, a typical cost for an energy audit for a vessel, a range? I realize it would be.
Again, it's everywhere probably from $10,000 to a couple $100,000, a few $100,000. Some of the projects, like these big Navy ships, they take me a year and a half to actually do it. I mean, they're huge. But the savings are huge. The retro commissioning efforts that I've been doing there, again, $5,000, $10,000 up to $100,000, $150,000. But just by resetting some of the stuff, just the air conditioning alone was $500,000, and that's on one ship out of a class. So it really depends on what you're looking at. You know, the Alaska Fisheries project that I'm doing, I did a little 46-foot wooden hull, double ender. It was he burned like $600 of fuel a year, a little tiny engine. I really don't know how much I saved them and how cost effective it was, but again, you know, there's 8,000 of them, so I think cumulatively it matters. But and a lot of it, I think my job is to be more of a catalyst too, and go in and trying to teach people the outreach so that they don't have to keep hiring me, that they can take it on within their own organization and foster that type of energy management environment.
Other questions?
This would be a general question. If you could develop an environmentally friendly research vessel, what would it look like? What would your parameters be? Multi-hull, single hull, wood, aluminum?
I paid that man.
And this is for ocean class also, not just near shore bays and estuaries.
Phil was a student of history. He looked long and hard, various cultures of the world, various shapes, various purposes of boats, and of course most of those vessels were built of sustainable materials, would have been wooden boats. A lot of people laugh at this, but I did show the Minesweeper during a shock testing event. I mentioned this earlier in the conversation, what's good enough for the Navy might be good enough for advanced research organizations. On our own private boat, 48 by 11, traditional plank on frame, oak on oak construction, New England sourced, almost locally sourced, very low carbon footprint. We understand the material is non-toxic. We coppered her bottom, maybe 900 pounds of 20 gauge, stuff that some people put on the roof of the house. We put it on the bottom of the boat. That gives you, in not too much movement, 15 years worth of usage. No bottom paint. The Admiral would love that. But you can't do it on a steel hull with copper. A research vessel folks may want to reconsider the least carbon intensive construction material, I keep coming back to wood, but maybe also modern composites, including the option of having modern composite boats that might be highly sinking resistant. I mentioned earlier, widows know where I live. Orphans do too. I don't want those folks to come and knock on my way. We've gone quite far. You saw the HMS Rose, the 2400 square rigger. We ran the numbers on her because these are our plans. We could keep her at the surface if the current owners were to equip her to do that. Not by spraying her full of happy foam, but to be quite surgically, strategic, or rather tactically correct in keeping that a zillion miles of open seams at the surface. Finally, research vessel, you obviously want to, as far as you can, harness wind power. Not for the romance or the drumming session on the after deck or any kind of silly. Wind power is solar power in another format, and you can go very far on a modest research budget if the vessel is a modern sailing vessel, not a high-tension Bermuda sloop from Newport over there, but something that may be divided in many different sails. The old-fashioned working sails where one master, one kid, and a scared dog ran a 100-foot vessel. And that today, we would have to talk with our friendly autopilot software engineers how to tie in the indicators with the rudder and the sheet winches that this thing sails by itself safely. And then finally, there's one more final. I live in tidal waters. We have between 8.5 and 12 feet of water in front of our house every day. And I think research vessels that can go very close inshore open up all sorts of doors, all sorts of territory, including the capacity to sit on the mud. If the vessel is designed like that and she doesn't take harm, you can do it. Our 48-footer has been up and down with the tides, hard, soft, about 11,000 times. No harm done. If you design it for it, you can do it. That opens shallow estuaries. It opens up places over sea, atolls, riverine, whatever. You can go very far with that. I can go on like this for hours, obviously, but I would propose for folks to discuss green boats. Consider the hull construction. How sustainably is it sourced? Consider using wind, cascading. And then finally, where Mr. Gaffney is doing this is important work. This is the guy who's dealing with the uglies. I can talk about happy, pretty visions. He has to deal with the nasties. He has to try to correct that. He's the guy who puts Band-Aids on open wounds and tries to stop the gangrene in an operation because he knows what he's looking at. In our universe, I'd like to see, hence my ranting earlier about a fishing regulation that do not allow such evolution. I think we should have a roundtable, not just in this large workshop for, but maybe dedicated to conceivably the greenest fishing and maybe research fleet, dedicated just to boats, beyond harbors, beyond all this other. This is fabulous. I like the diversity here, but we so far have not had such a meeting in the Northeast, as far as I know. I was invited to one international meeting, November 14th through 17th, Seattle, organized by NOAA, World Bank, and UNFAO. Energy use in commercial fishing, 18 nations in a room, and I was doing my nervous act. It was the only time something like this had happened. I'm not going to go back until we actually have a green boat out of Gloucester. There's no point in keep saying the same thing. I won't be back here either unless we've got something done. But we should have much more discussion on it. I really depend on folks like you, including our academic friends here. You've got to take it seriously that we have a federal agency. It's not conspiracy. This is tragic, hard reality. We're not allowed to evolve as green, sustainable commercial fishing fleet in the 21st century. That's just wild. It sounds like a madcap conspiracy scam of some sort, but it isn't. It really isn't what it is. So I need your help. Maybe we should continue the conversation. As you notice, I can speak slowly too. And some days I only have a cup of milk or Ovaltine.
I'd like to add on to that a little bit, going back to the presentation, is not oversizing the equipment. It's doing the stuff that's cost effective, doing heat recovery, waste heat, whatever the case may be. You saw how, use all that energy in a fuel if that's what you're using. There's so much energy wasted from oversizing equipment. If you start with smaller equipment, then you can get smaller wire going to it. If you're running a pump, put a variable speed drive on it, size it for what it needs, or multiple pumps. I mean, all that stuff, you can really significantly lower your energy consumption. So I would build an energy model first and try to see what was most cost effective and downsize everything to the minimum that you could safely operate.
So on the technological side, not the wooden boat side, if you maintained a ship that you replaced your fuel tanks with battery banks, the weight ratio is about the same, and you can still get the same performance.
Other questions? It's just a comment in regards to some of these comments. In Green Boat 2, I think we talked about the Henry Bayless, which was a composite hull sailing vessel on the West Coast, and it was used quite effectively for biological work and geophysical work. It was a very quiet boat, and it was a nice example of if you will, a niche research boat that utilizes sail for a lot of the work. So it was a good example of something that's different from what we're normally thinking about. Other questions? Peter.
Actually, to bring up that example, it's more of a comment than a question. But one of the things about it was exactly your point, because as a sailboat, and I, as a person who's a sailor anyhow, it's a more efficient motorboat than most of these motorboat research vessels, because they did a lot of that work, not under sail, but under power. But like my boat, they use like a gallon an hour to run their Perkins 4108 to do it, so.
We're able to do our work under sail, a lot of our work under sail, our research, and we've set up our sails to accommodate whatever our research objectives are. So if we're doing net tows or something where 3 knots is the right speed, we've got headsails of different sizes that we've got kind of ready to be able to adjust so that it's easy to go up and down with them, or we have a certain amount of mainsail up and then drop the headsails to drop speed. But it's pretty nice, I have to say, to be able to entirely, on some days, do our work under sail. And we're very similar to the Bayless. We're a little smaller. And they have that cool rig.
Yeah, the wishbone.
Yeah, the two. Yeah.
Bob, you had mentioned that Rhode Island is moving towards biofuel by 2030. Are other states doing similar things? And the same goes with biolubricants. Are there more regulations that are coming down the way that might help sustainability causes?
I think there are. I mean, Rhode Island's not the only state that has an energy plan for the future. I mean, almost every state is doing that. And even on the national level, there's a renewable fuel standard that is encouraging the use of renewables. So all that is happening. It takes time, and it takes the effort to make the logistical effort to make that work. You know, so that's our biggest problem, I think. There is an enthusiasm to go forward, but how do you actually do it is really the question. So we're working that issue pretty hard.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and finish your.
Yeah, on the regulation. So the vessel general permit applies to commercial vessels used in transportation over 79 feet. So your research vessels that are over 79 feet must use biodegradable lubricants in certain applications. There is a companion set of regulations called the small vessel general permit it actually went into effect last December, but everything has been, put on hold for a while they work some things out. So smaller vessels should come under this at some point. Recreational vessels, though, are exempt, largely because a lot of your senators and congressmen have yachts and they didn't want to have to deal with it. So we'll see what happens there. The Europeans are implementing something very similar. They're working on it right now. I mentioned the Polar Code has put it in there. It's only a recommendation right now, but I think it should move beyond that. And then you just get into smaller markets, like Brazil has pretty good work on this, but just in their oil and gas industry, they do that. The North Sea, the same way. In the North Sea, they have very stringent restrictions for the oil and gas business there. So you're starting to see it elsewhere.
May I ask a question? When you're Doing those lubricants, do you need to design the ship differently, or can it just take the same situation as petroleum-based lubricants?
I think you have to look at the equipment itself, and then, so we're working with the thruster manufacturers. The thrusters are the 360-degree rotational propellers that you see on ships, the bottom of a ship. They have seals, elastomers, that keep the oil from going into the water. All of those have to be changed over. So, the design of the equipment itself does change. And I'm a lubricant manufacturer and marketer, but I will tell you that the VGP has also worked towards finding places where you can eliminate lubricants. And I think John, I think it was last year, I showed the example of the water lubricated stern tubes that are coming back. And I'll tell you a funny story. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago, and somebody is selling lignum vitae stern tubes now. Does anybody remember what lignum vitae is? He has purchased the rights to harvesting sustainably from Uruguay, and it's now making lignum vitae stern tubes. I was flabbergasted.
So I think
can
I one more question?
Yeah, sorry. I wanted to address the question earlier about what the ideal ocean-class green research vessel would look like. Just before I go into this, I'm going to say I think I'm maybe somewhat uniquely qualified. I've been through the process of designing 2 ocean-class vessels, one in China, one here in the U.S., and my company's been involved in designing a multitude. And lately, the green energy has been front and center, or greening of the vessels have been front and center. So I guess I could go on for a half an hour, but if I could just have 2 minutes, I would say that the first and foremost is making sure that the vessel can perform its mission. And starting with the hull, that means optimizing the hull for the mission. And for modern research vessels, that means making sure that you don't have bubbles sweeping over your transducers. So making sure that your hull form doesn't cause bubbles. But maybe you want to have a bulbous bow. So we've developed hull forms that can do that. So you want to have absolutely the sleekest hull that you can and still meet your mission. Moving on to the propulsion system, being an ocean-class research vessel, you're going to have a extremely variable load, and you may not know what that load is going to be from day to day, week to week, depending on your mission. So it absolutely has to be diesel-electric, just in order to efficiently manage that load. This day and age, I would seriously consider looking at variable speed diesel engines. It's an emerging technology. It doesn't always work, but you want to look at your individual load profile, and it may be a match. And if it is a good fit for a diesel, for a variable speed diesel, you can potentially save even 10% over what a conventional diesel might save. So that's in sort of big picture stuff. Going into maybe somewhat more exotic territory, aside from the obvious energy efficiency measures that you absolutely should take, I would say if the budget allows, looking at energy storage is not a crazy idea at all, which would make it, I guess that would put it into the sort of hybrid vessel zone, but there's many places on a modern research vessel that you can capture energy, not the least of which would be, almost all your winches are going to have braking resistors. That's, instead of generating a bunch of heat, you could potentially be storing that energy in a battery. There's many other places where that energy could be stored, and even with variable speed generators, there could be the opportunity to store some of your energy. And then maybe going even more exotic, and we actually have looked at this from Monterey Bay Research Institute, kite sails. We've looked at all kinds of sails for research vessels, and kite sails which have been implemented on a number of large ocean-going vessels. I would say they're maybe the only kind of sail that would really work for a modern ocean-class research vessel. They can be tucked away on the bow. They actually are completely automated, and you can get them out of the way. And they basically drop on as a piece of modular equipment with push-button controls in the bridge. So when the wind conditions are are when the conditions are attractive, you can essentially push the button, the thing deploys itself, and once you've got the kite there, and once you have all the other technology in place, you have the opportunity to actually generate power from the wind and store it in your batteries. So anyway, just sort of from the simple to the exotic, those are some of the big picture things that I can think of.
We've got another workshop coming in.
I think there are some good comments, and I would just add to that I think we, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but over the last 6 to 7 years have made considerable progress with the ocean class vessels that are coming online now, with the regional class research vessels that we'll hear about tomorrow, the Sikuliak. This was highlighted this morning in Tim and Bob's comments, that we are incorporating these sorts of things with these new vessels moving forward. And I think those are the sorts of questions you're posing, sort of the bigger questions, are things that we are continuing to think about as we move forward.
If I may, we briefly talk about hydroelectric, we talked to all electric. Folks have been using electric power for a long time. I think electric boat companies started in the 1890s maybe. Old lead acid batteries, that was good for the next 100 years. It still works actually. There was a class of battleships, I think over 10,000 tons, US Navy, that were actually final drive was by electric motors. They did this for about 10 years, so yanked them out for a number of reasons. We know how to drive things electric, submarines, whatever. The fundamental in terms of green boating and green industrial use of electric power, the question is always, where do you get your electricity from, obviously? You folks are addressing this, having a number of panels on it. Does never feed one-to-one, but it certainly extends the range if the sun shines, if you have the right angle, and if the normal rating of the panels is getting there, which in our experience may be a real challenge. But everybody's trying it. The smarter the electronics, the better it's going to go. So the question is always from source to the final usage. You can never get more out of a solar boat than you put in, and where it's coming from really matters. 15 years ago or so in professional boat building, there was a story about a boat called the Charger, all electric. Lots of batteries, high-end this, special that. He had a cruising range of 10, 15, 20 miles, and it took 3 days to recharge at the regular marina outlet power. That was really not a viable business model. So it's like with electric cars. For a long time, we had on Manhattan more electric cars in the 1890s than Mr. Tesla today or Mr. Musk would have dreamt of, having electric cars all over Manhattan. But the question was always one of range. So where does it come from? How far can you carry it? LiPo batteries, lithium ion, the whole package. We're getting smart about it, hopefully not set ourselves on fire. But the question, even if you're the best system, most highly integrated, saltwater resistant, hopefully even affordable, which is not necessarily the case in terms of average folks, then you still have to worry about where's that energy coming from. So there's no smooth talking your way out of the fundamental issue. Is it nuclear source? Is it coal-fired source or whatever? So it's just a minor footnote on us having discussed electrical power. We know how to get boats to be driven by electric power. The question is, how green is the juice we put in? And you guys are going quite far with your canopy, but obviously there's more work to be done.
So just a short comment from my side. We've been talking a lot about are the clients ready for the eco solutions in boats, in green boats. And I must say that my observation is that we are very different from the motor sector, because in motor you don't have alternative. In boats you have alternative, because actually you have equilibrium. You have people who are sailing on the sailboats. They are by definition eco. They can replace, of course, their motorboats by electric engines. And then you have the ones that are more into motorboats, and this is the niche where we are looking for. We want to give them the same. That was the last sentence of my presentation. Just as Tesla did, the same durability, the same efficiency. You have the same car, but it's eco. You can speed it with 5 seconds to 100 kilometers per hour, but it's the range is the same as with the gasoline. And unless we don't have the technology which allows us to provide it to them, we won't catch those clients, but we can catch other clients, and this is what we are doing, because actually we can see that people who have not been into boats are very interested in our boats, because they can see that they buy it only once, they don't have to spend anything. on gasoline. They know that maintenance costs are close to zero, and this is I during this conference I received a call from the business partner of Mr. JP DeJoria. I think he's a multi-billionaire who is in the States, who is in the hairdressing company. He's very famous, as I could check on the Wikipedia. And he wants to have our boats for some reality show and for some hairdressing events in these boats, because he likes the concept, he likes the eco, he likes the design, and this is the path that we are trying to follow. We are not focusing on the traditional market. We see that the doors are open because people are crazy about eco solutions, but not necessarily people from, by definition, from the boat sector or maritime sector in the traditional way. So I'm impressed by the call that I just received, and this is why I'm sharing it with you. But we have different opportunities here.
So I think we can continue this discussion in the next phase, which will be the reception and posters. And we had posters the first time in Greenboat 1. Annette, and I actually had one of those posters, but Annette has told me that this year we've got a number of really good posters. And so I guess the bar's been raised. But we do have 10 or 11 posters that I would encourage you to take a look at as part of the reception activities. So to get from A to B, you go out this building, walk up the hill, and the OSEC building is the large new building on the left across the road. And we'll reconvene there in 5 to 10 minutes for a drink. What's that? It's in the upper level. Thank you to the speakers this afternoon.